What's up, guys? Welcome back to Sport Vitamins, episode 35. Today's guest is Brandon Pentheny. His background is really interesting, transitioning from Olympic lifting to basketball to baseball now. He will cover so many different topics, such as the importance of being an athlete yourself and how to train different sports in different environments. So, without further ado, guys, here's the episode with Brandon Pentheny. All right, Brandon, welcome on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about a little bit and learn more about each other.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on today with us. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to our skills development coach, Isaac Jenkins, and I want to give a shout out to him to make the introduction. And he said, "Man, you gotta have this guy on your show." So here you are with me.
That's good to hear. Thanks, Isaac, for the kind words, and the good time spent with him last year with the Pacers organization, and then the G League bubble at Disney World.
Yeah. So Brandon, usually I start the episode asking my guest a little background.
Yeah, originally I was born and raised in Oregon, just southeast Portland area. Ended up going to University of Oregon and getting an undergrad in human physiology. And now in retrospect, I can't praise that program enough. It was like one of the only schools that didn't have a med school attached that also had human cadavers. So getting to actually learn anatomy and physiology from a hands-on perspective of dissecting a human body is a little different when you're trying to fully understand how a human might move through its three-dimensional space if you can know that parameter, and even in a deceased body and how that moves. Got my master's from Georgetown and did a thesis in fatigue metrics within the NBA type population. While I was at Oregon, I was involved with the basketball program as a practice player, and then towards the end of my time in undergrad, I was involved, and I was a athlete in the next Olympic hopeful development pipeline and trying to make an Olympic team. And it's a tough task, but not everyone fully makes it to the Olympic Games or whatnot. So, but it was definitely a fun journey on that perspective. A lot of Olympic hopefuls or Olympic athletes that try to make an Olympics aren't technically making a lot of money. So I knew I had to develop some form of other way to try to develop a career outside of my personal sports. So I worked in some PT clinics, worked at Exos at Adidas, a biomechanics lab, and then at University of Arizona as a strength coach, and then spent 3 seasons with the Indiana Pacers organization, and then just started with the Washington Nationals organization not too long ago. But luckily and fortunate enough to learn from a lot of great minds and mentors during my career. So going to be a summation of those that all have imprinted on us before. So really lucky in that aspect.
Yeah, can you tell us some of the mentors that you have throughout your career?
Yeah, just being able to learn early on at the University of Oregon from someone like James Radcliffe or Coach Radcliffe. He had a fairly large imprint on our youth and high school development. So that was a big one out of the gate. And he almost fathered or influenced the plyometric push in the early 80s. So he has his book, The High Power Plyometrics. So that had a high influence on a lot of our programs at Oregon. Not that he was a mentor, but my training time at Oregon towards the tail end was at the same time as Ashton Eaton and his wife, Brianne Tyson Eaton, and then their coach, Harry Myra. And just being able to understand Ashton Eaton is like the pinnacle of how somebody moves really well through three-dimensional space. And if for those don't know that might be listening, he was a 2-time Olympic champion in the decathlon and set multiple world records, and beat his own world record at the time. And that's not an easy feat to do. And so just being able to watch him move and the mindset he took and the approach that he took to training was good to learn from a fly sitting on the wall perspective. And then watching him get coached and strategies to elicit certain movement potentials was extremely fun to watch as well from his coach. But then in the Olympic development pipeline, we had a lot of sound coaching from people like Mike Gattone, who is the right-hand man of Pyrrhus Demas, and there's not a better duo to learn Olympic lifting derivatives than those two. I'm probably missing a couple that I owe their due to, but big ones with the Pacers of being able to learn from Sean Wendell and some of those guys as well.
Very interesting. A lot of great coaches. You just mentioned a lot of great coaches. And you also said that you were a weightlifter yourself. So how much of that experience you use with your athletes now?
Yeah, I mean, you try to use bits and pieces. Not fully getting to it. There's a lot of technical aspects within the Olympic lifts of clean and jerk and snatch, but being able to parse them apart and see where they're applicable is a big portion. But the time it would take to teach somebody to adequately clean and jerk might not be the full juices worth the squeeze of what you're trying to chase, especially in a team setting where time and is valuable, and as well as fatigue, because it might take a lot more to teach somebody that aspect. But knowing whatever adaptation or stimulus you're chasing and being able to parse that apart and use some of those is a big one. But yeah, generally, since they're so technical, it's not always worth it.
Got it. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Also, myself, when it comes to teaching Olympic lifts, I use a lot of Olympic lifts and Olympic lift variations just if I have young athletes or athletes that I have to develop, and maybe I know that I'm gonna have them for like 3 or 4 years. With more experienced guys that I know that I probably have for just one season, I don't use those kind of lifts because, as you said, it takes a lot of time to learn, and if you don't have the right technique, you don't know the right technique, it's also easy to get hurt actually.
Yeah, exactly. I think you could use some forms of it either with a kettlebell or dumbbell to get similar movements as well, as like a dumbbell jerk or something have you, and it's a little bit safer. But
yeah,
I definitely agree.
I agree. And overall, what's your philosophy in the weight room then?
Yeah, that's always the tough age-old question for a lot of people, but being able to start with a decision process through some form of evaluation and testing, so you need to be able to determine what their greatest or limiting factors are, and then finding whether those are energy or kinematic detriments or deficiencies, and then how to go about fixing or refining or improving those if need be. So that aspect should take a lot of the brunt of any training philosophy and not being married to one system or idea. I kind of like the thought of no absolutes, but can you be stable and mobile? Can you be strong and flexible? But being able to, I mean, if you're working in the high performance setting or any team setting, you've got to be ability to combine fundamental training principles with common sense and the ability to adjust and adapt to any rigors of the schedule. So adaptability is huge in terms of shaping the philosophy of what stimulus you're chasing and how that fits into what type of schedule you have. But once the parameters and some of the rate limiting or excelling factors are established, then it becomes a bit easier to map out training, because now the framework has kind of been established, and with framework laid out, training goals and metrics, it becomes easier to adapt to some of those changing variables that might arise. Because ultimately, we want athletes that can move well through a three-dimensional space, and hopefully reduce the overall likelihood of any soft tissue injuries or what have you. So designing training sessions that mimic or manipulate the environment and encourage athletes' body to keep refining neural pathways while discouraging less efficient pathways. So being able to choose exercise or movements with a purpose holistically and understand the movements and contextual limits of those. And so the exercise selection will follow along with load parameters and range of motion parameters. It's more or less the philosophy that I take.
I got it. Can you please take us through the evaluation and assessment process that you run with your athletes?
Yeah, it depends on whether it's scalable or not in terms of how many athletes you have going through. As the less athletes you have, obviously you can get a little bit more fine-tuned, but some form of movement screen, and it obviously depends on the athlete group. So in basketball, movement screen, some jump kinematics, how they land and jump through different spaces on a force plate. Big on something like the West test and tracking some of the movements of limb deviation is pretty big. Initial portion of some movement screens and testing and evaluation. And then as it progresses, even the adage of the test is the exercise and the exercise is the test, you can start to pick up on if what we're seeing in the data matches what we're seeing with our eyes, both from a exercise selection standpoint or through the movement, as well as what you're seeing on court, and if it matches some of the other parameters, if that makes sense. From a baseball standpoint, getting timing gates and stuff like that as well, and grip strength is pretty big, and on top of some kinematic sequencing.
I got it. And this is something that always fascinates me, because it's not really common for a strength coach in Europe to change different sports, like to work, for example, with soccer and then with basketball, then with volleyball, while it's something that is really common in the United States. So what's your thought process when it comes to coaching a different sport, to changing completely the environment, and also to having to deal with completely different athletes? Because last year you were with basketball athletes that we all know that are very tall, long levers, and some limitations in the ankles, maybe hips. And now you work with baseball athletes that are definitely stronger, that have more muscle mass, and probably you need to pay more attention to the shoulder joints, elbow joints, and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think it's base level. If we want to talk about just the human perspective, people are people, and a lot of people come from differing backgrounds, but we're all generalized experiences, similar experiences. So the athlete that might have grown up in a certain portion of America for basketball might have a very similar or very similar structure, maybe formatted itself in a different manner of life in a different portion of the country that just interacts a little bit different. So some of the basic human aspects are not unique in that perspective. So it's easy to connect with a lot of people because people want to get better in the high performance environment generally. From a movement standpoint, you're right. The basketball athletes have long levers and are a little bit taller, but human movement isn't technically unique to one sport. The act of what that sport is doing might be a little bit different, and now that mechanism of injury might masticize itself in a different manner. But some of the kinematic sequencing and what have you aren't too far off unless it's being exacerbated. Does that kind of make sense of what I'm saying.
Absolutely, absolutely. And how much preparation there is behind the decision of starting to coach a different sport? I mean, like if I have to think about myself, if tomorrow a soccer team calls me, I know that I need to study. I need to study a lot because I don't know that specific sport. How does that work for you?
Yeah, so I think it ties well into your last question of knowing the human body and knowing the common energy leaks and common points of injury and how these certain regions interact with each other and from like a chain reaction biomechanics standpoint. So knowing that is huge because that those sports often a lot of those are chain reaction biomechanics. Um, but yeah, being able to go back and either watch film or read more on that said sport and how those common injuries occur, and then the little tropes of the nuance of how people talk about certain things or refer pain might be a little bit different across sports. But um, if you can understand some of the chain reaction biomechanics and how certain muscles or groupings of what joints do with each other and how that might refer up or down is a big component in really understanding how that sport might go around, and then understand the volume demands and how uh, the overall load or workload might show itself across a season or a practice or what have you. But being able to go back and kind of parse those apart is huge.
Sure. And as far as communication, how do you go about communicating effectively with your athletes now? Because, for example, if you have a basketball team, if you coach a basketball team, you know that you have in front of you just maybe 12, 13, or 14 athletes. While now, with the best baseball team, you probably have something between 25 and 40 players on a single team, right? So,
Yeah.
how do you make sure to communicate effectively with a lot of athletes?
I think, yeah, the basketball one, since you're with a short or small amount of guys, you can, and you're around them so often, you can just pick up on things with just being around and not being per se active in the conversation or learning about. Whereas baseball in this scenario, especially in a spring training environment where you do have 80 to 120 guys at any given time during camp, that you need to really be active in terms of putting in the effort to show you care and learn more about them, and then trying to do your best to remember all those little things of, oh, this is this guy's name, this is where he's from, he might have played college here, or he came out straight out of high school guy. And there's finding things that commonalities make you bond. Obviously with more people it's going to take a little bit more time, but yeah, it's definitely one that at either level that you have to put in the effort, and then that makes communicating a little bit easier from once people know you care, and that aspect with it, whether it's in the weight room or on the field or on the court. um,
Okay.
if
And
that makes sense.
yeah, absolutely. Always talking about communication. Uh, what's the communication that you have with the coaching staff that you had with the coaching staff in the G League, and now what kind of communication as far as maybe reports and stuff like that now you have with the coaching staff in the minor league?
Yeah, and in basketball, since there's so few amount of people relative to baseball, um, back to the you spend so much time, so it becomes a lot easier to communicate with some of those coaches because um, you know their style of communicating, you know, kind of what makes them tick a lot sooner than you do when there's more people around. Um, and just being in the G League, knowing how their coaching style is and what type of effective communication you can have with that person to either get your point across or really serve the athlete a little bit better, um, becomes a little easier since the staff is a little bit smaller. Whereas in baseball, it takes a lot more time just because there's a lot more cooks in the kitchen, and being able kind of parse those apart and being able to communicate the why for whatever you're talking about, and being able to break it down into parts, but being able to present information in a manner that's constructive and not attacking anyone in either field or in either sport.
Yeah, I like it. Great answer. And let's switch gears. And I want to go back to your experience as an athlete. You said that you almost made the Olympic team, right? So how big,
kind of sort of.
how big that experience was for your career, and how important was that for your coaching philosophy, and how important was that for how you deal with athletes now?
I think it was. I mean, it was really imperative for me to go through it, just because I'm a competitive person, and it's something that's relatively hard to do, and so it was worth the chase, even if you don't get it. But from a coaching perspective, I think from either basketball or Olympics or Olympic development, excuse me, it's important to have. It's not vital, but I think it's nice to have that aspect, and being able to players kind of know that you've gone through a similar process in terms of being on a team, or that type of lifestyle of driving towards a athletic goal. So being able for them to know that you've kind of gone through that sort of grind, per se, and then being able to fully understand it, if you can look back in retrospect with an actual lens and see how you got there, because there's a lot of athletes that maybe go into coaching that were gifted but don't know exactly the steps, or they might have had this or that or the other that accelerated them, but they didn't fully recognize that, like, that doesn't work for everyone. Is a big one that I've noticed. But I don't necessarily think that physical competency equals mental competency in that realm. So it's not essentially vital that you had gone through a high performance sport yourself to be able to coach some of it and parse apart some of that, those aspects.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. Even though I think that it makes our life a little bit easier as far as getting the buy-in of our athletes.
Yeah, I think it's you can earn a bit of quick respect, and then after that, you gotta be able to back it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you give us a few tips on how to get the buy-in of the athletes?
I think tip number one is you got to know, or they got to know you actually care. That's huge. You can't just go in and start barking orders and act like you don't care about them at all. So it's being able to center around building that optimal relationship that you're working with and training, and just being able to keep showing up for them. And I think that helps create some buy-in and trust. And with that buy-in and trust, you can drive some consistency. And then with consistency, you'll see the results through training. And then one of the things that also helps create a buy-in is creating a fun environment, and being able to show them the shifts in what their hard work or fruits of their labor might bring, and then being able to meet them where they're at with their training, so you're not just throwing them into the fire every day.
I like this one. How do you create a fun environment?
I mean, it depends on the individual, but just being able to keep it loose and knowing that you can still have fun and get after it, and everything doesn't have to be so rigid, and stuff can keep the free flowing. Let's be about our business and still work, but let's still have fun, if that makes sense. Whether that's music or just being able to talk about life, but we're still going to get after it within the constraints of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, for example, I have a very simple rule. We don't talk about basketball in the weight room.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, we talk about anything else. We always have our music pumping, but never talk about basketball. We talk about basketball outside of the weight room. But that's a
We
simple.
spend so much time talking about basketball. Let's talk about something else and
Exactly.
enjoy the time we have here and actually get to work and whatnot.
Exactly. So, Brandon, thank you very much. It was very interesting. Usually we finish off with three rapid fire questions. Okay, you ready?
Do it.
All right. Yeah. So, first one, what's your favorite sport?
To watch or to play?
Both.
Play basketball. Probably I like watching track and field. Maybe not as a whole, but individual events.
Okay.
But I'll just have to go with basketball. Basketball Bulls for that.
Nice. Second one, your favorite strength and conditioning book?
It's kind of tough. Game Changers, probably, by Fergus Connolly.
Nice. I like it. Highly recommend it. And third one, your go-to exercise in the weight room?
For myself?
For yourself?
Snatches.
And for your athlete?
Some form of single leg RDL or some fun with some loaded mobility with a kettlebell per se.
Nice, I like it. Okay, Brandon, is there anything else you want to add or a message you want to leave our listeners with?
Just be willing to understand the steps that got you where you are, and don't be afraid to be able to lend a willing hand to somebody who's trying to learn behind you that is also coming up the rungs. There's it's not pie. We all have a chance at learning and developing and growing. So be about helping others.
Okay, thank you very much, Brandon. Thanks for taking the time and spending some time with us today.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
And it's a wrap on episode 35 of Sport Vitamins, another great episode with another amazing guest. If you haven't done it yet, go to my YouTube channel. You can find it typing Roberto Iezzi, subscribe, and of course share the episode if you like. And remember that you can find Sport Vitamins on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts. Until next week, guys, I am out.